Hi everybody, Carol here. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be doing a brush lettering of a quote by Charles M. Schulz. So I will quit talking and put on some music, but I will come back when it's over because since it's so short, I'm going to make a little cover to go on it, and I'll show you how I do that when we get back. So I hope you enjoy. Sit back and read and relax. Okay, so there you are. It's chocolate and all. So I wrote the little saying, of course, and set it aside, and now I'm going to stamp a little piece to go beside it, and I'm using a stamp set called For the Love of Chocolate, appropriately enough. And so I picked out two stamps to use, and they are, one's a box of chocolates for Valentine's in a Valentine's box, and the other is just some little individual chocolates. So I'm going to speed this up because I didn't want it to be too long. It's really more about the quote, but I'm using my Stamp-A-Majig here so that I can get the box of chocolates where I want it on the page. You can see I had to turn it at a really big angle to get it located where I wanted, and so I'm mashing it really hard to try to get a good impression, and then I'm going to leave it there so that the ink can get a good chance to transfer over onto that colored paper. So while I was waiting, I thought, well, I'll go ahead and stamp the little chocolates, individual ones, and put them on a little thin sheet of this same tan paper, and flip it over and do it again because I actually want 6 chocolates. I'm going to cut them out and put them in little groups of 2. So I'm putting my positioner back to see if that stamped well, and it didn't really stamp all that well, so I did it again. When this was over, I went back and re-inked my ink pads. I have 2 browns, and I re-inked both of them. So now I am coming in with a makeup sponge and that same brown ink. It's the same color of ink as the paper, and so it's called caramel, and so I also sped this up because it's a kind of long and not so to watch process. I'm just going over and over again. I want that upper left-hand corner to be darker than the rest of the page, and so I'm just kind of lightening it out as I go. I cut a mask of that box of chocolates, and I'm covering it up, and as it turns out, I later end up stamping another box of chocolates, cutting it out and layering it on top of that. So it's a little bit dimensional, but I didn't know I was going to do that at the time. Now, you can see the big mistake I made there. I had been stamping this teeny tiny little heart in red and forgot. So I knew I also wanted it in white, so I go back and just stab it in there and make part of the ink pad pink, but it's really easy to go back and fix, and I will go back and get that pink ink off of there. So I wanted some red hearts and I wanted some white hearts, and I'm just scattering them around. The major emphasis is going to be in the upper left-hand corner coming down to midway. It's going to kind of be the design kind of at an angle as far as these little hearts go. And then I also have another little stamp set that's just 3 little dots, and I'm just scattering them around. I hope you can see them. I'm doing them in white. And then I go back and do it in that same brown color. And I'm just stamping them in between the hearts and just kind of fill in that background, but just highlighting that upper corner and kind of leaving the lower corner a little bit plain, except for the chocolates that I'll come back and glue on later. Now I'm going back and coloring the little red heart on the top of that Valentine box, and then taking a white pencil and just going around the wrappers of the chocolates, just so that they will show off a little more from the individual pieces of chocolate. And so then here I am cutting out the individual pieces of chocolate, and I'm not going to cut them all out because it's not that much fun to watch, I'm sure. So I will cut them out and show you later how I put them on there. Now I've turned this kind of like a booklet, but not really. It's different. I was kind of experimenting. I just basically wanted a cover. So I'm using my swing line punch, and I've punched, I had to move that little thing actually because this is a smaller sheet of paper than what I had been using. So I had to line the holes up better. So when you turn that over, you'll see that I stamped another of the chocolate box, and I'll come back and do some more with that in a minute. But I had this yarn that's very, very thin, but it's all colors, reds and yellows and blues and greens. It's real nubby and knobby, and so it's so thin that I put 2 strips together, and I'm loading them in through the holes on the bottom page. And then I thought, how am I going to get this to, if I'm going to tie these together so that they will be equal as far as the distance for the booklet is like a ring, but you want the rings to be the same size. So I'll get back to that. This right now I'm showing you how I did go ahead and put on that extra box of chocolates on top, and there are actually some little pieces of paper between to raise it up just a tiny bit. Then I'm gluing on the little pieces of chocolate that I had sitting aside drying so they could be repositionable. It's Tombow glue and Tombow liquid glue. And so I'm going to show you what I came up with here. I got 2 wooden stamps, and I'm placing them, they're the same height, so I'm placing them on either end of the white cardstock, and I'm going to thread this yarn back through the hole of the top piece. So I'm kind of basically turning this into a book, but not really. It's just to add a little more to that very short saying. So I'm threading it back through both holes, top and bottom, and then I'm going to lay that top piece on top of those wooden blocks, and that's how I can be sure that I'm tying them the same distance apart. Yes, I could have cut the yarn the same length, but that doesn't mean that I would necessarily tie the knot in the same place from the end of the yarn. And so this way I'm going to tie it right up against the paper, try to make a square knot here, and that way by doing that they will be the same length and no getting around it. So I'm speeding it up because it was a little tedious working with that thin yarn, especially actually 4 pieces at each hole. But you can see now that is tight. It's nice and firm and tight, and the same size. So I'm removing the blocks, and so when it opens, they're the same distance apart. And so there was a cover, and I'm going back and on that second heart that I put down, I'm going back and coloring in, or I should say box chocolates, coloring in the red heart again, and going around those little wrappers again. And I'll have to do it on the front page too, but it just such little coloring, it just took a second. So but I thought I'd show you that that's what I did. And I went back and even made little highlights on the tops of the individual pieces of chocolate. None of it's necessary. You could do as much as you wanted to do. So when you smooth out the little threads, my scissors are there. You can see I went back and cut the threads off a little bit, but I kind of like long tails on things, so I left it on purpose. And so that's the way it turned out. And it's very flexible, very movable. I'm picking it up there so you can see how you could pick it up and still be able to read the actual saying without it being all tight as in a card. It's got a lot of space to move around, a lot of wiggle room, you might say. So then I thought, well, that front, I need to do something. So I'm just going to go back and write the word love. Simple, not much to it, really fast. And that just kind of finished off the cover. Although originally I didn't even plan to have this be the actual cover. But one thing leads to another when you're crafting. So anyway, hope you enjoy. I may try this technique again, maybe in a different version. We'll just see. My main emphasis kind of is on the quote at this point, especially at Valentine. So thanks for watching and being here today, and we'll see you real soon, I'm sure.